Part 1. First Contact at the Galactic Council. The Meridian Station hung in the void of space like a jewel suspended in darkness. Its massive structure contained over 200 levels, with thousands of diplomatic chambers, council halls, and alien quarters. Today, it would witness something that had never happened before. For the first time in recorded history, humans were about to stand before the unified Galactic Council. Captain Jake Porter stood in the observation deck of the human transport ship. He wore his dress uniform, clean and sharp, with the Earth Defense Force insignia on his chest. His dark eyes looked out at the station getting closer. His jaw was set firm. He was nervous, but he did not show it. Dr. Lisa Grant walked up beside him. She was the leading scientist from Earth's xenobiology program. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her intelligent eyes reflected the light of distant stars. She carried a data pad with all of humanity's technical achievements and cultural information. "They are going to be cruel to us," Lisa said quietly. "I have studied their reports. The species alone has sent 3 messages saying that humans are too primitive for council membership." Jake did not turn away from the window. "Let them talk," he said. "We came here to show them what we are made of. Words do not matter. Actions matter." Lisa smiled a little. She had known Jake for 5 years. She knew he was a man who believed in what he said. He was not just brave. He was real. He did not hide behind false words or fake smiles. The transport began to dock with Meridian Station. The airlock hissed as it sealed. Jake took a breath and led Lisa and the rest of the human delegation toward the council chamber. There were 12 humans total. Scientists, diplomats, soldiers, and representatives from different nations on Earth. They all wore their best clothes. They all held their heads high. The council chamber was enormous. The ceiling rose up more than 5 stories. The walls glowed with soft light. Around the massive circular table sat representatives from 43 different alien species. Some were tall and thin. Some had multiple arms. Some had no arms at all, instead using energy fields to move objects. The oldest and most powerful of them looked at the humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to pure disdain. Queen sat at the head of the council. She was tall and elegant. Her skin shifted colors like oil on water, moving from deep purple to bright blue to gold. She had 4 arms, each one graceful and powerful. Her eyes were deep black without pupils, and they seemed to contain the depths of space itself. She was the ruler of the HAL Empire, one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. When she moved even slightly, the entire council noticed. Ambassador Wei, the human diplomat, stepped forward. He began to speak about Earth. He talked about how humans had evolved on a world with harsh conditions. He explained how humans had survived ice ages, meteor strikes, and natural disasters. He spoke about how humans had built civilizations, created art, written music, and developed science. As Wei talked, Jake watched the council members' reactions. Some of them looked bored, others looked angry. The ambassador actually stood up and spoke without waiting for permission. "These creatures are weak," he said. His voice was like grinding metal. "They live only 100 years. They need constant food and water. They are ruled by emotion instead of logic. They have no place on this council." Other voices joined in. Insults flew across the chamber. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. He wanted to stand up and yell at them, but he did not. He waited. He watched. He listened. Then Lisa presented the scientific data. She showed how humans could adapt to different environments. She explained human ingenuity and creativity. She talked about the fact that humans had created technology that could rival much older civilizations, despite being a young species. Some of the younger council members seemed interested, but the old guard remained unmoved. After 2 hours, the council declared that they needed more time to decide on human membership. They would vote in 3 days. Until then, the humans were dismissed from the chamber. That night, Jake stood alone in the human quarters. He looked out at the stars and thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about his sister who worked as a teacher. He thought about his father who was a fisherman. None of them expected him to change the galaxy. They just expected him to do his best. The next morning, a message came through. Queen had requested a private meeting with Captain Jake Porter. The rest of the human delegation was shocked. Wei warned Jake to be careful, but Jake agreed to go. He was escorted through the station by 2 guards. They were tall and covered in blue scales. They said nothing. Finally, they came to a large private chamber. The Queen stood by a massive window that looked out onto the stars. She turned to face Jake. Up close, she was even more impressive. She moved with absolute grace and confidence. When she looked at Jake, her expression was hard to read. "Captain Porter," she said, her voice smooth as silk but with an edge of power underneath. "You stood firm today even when my council showed you no respect. Most humans would have shown anger or fear. You showed neither. Why?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "Because we belong here," he said simply. "We came a long way to tell you that. If I had lost my temper or shown fear, it would have proven your counsel right. So I stayed calm. I let our achievements speak for themselves." Queen studied him. Her colors shifted through green and purple. "That is an interesting answer," she said. "Come, walk with me. I want to know more about your people. I want to understand what makes humans different." As they walked through the corridors of Meridian Station, Jake found himself talking more openly than he had ever done to a stranger. He spoke about human history, human dreams, human struggles, and Queen asked questions, real questions. She genuinely wanted to understand. By the time they returned to the human quarters, something had changed between them. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. The Queen had seen something in humanity that her council had missed, and Jake had seen something in her too. A person who was willing to think for herself, even if it meant going against the rest of the galaxy. The Queen looked at him one last time before she left. "Tomorrow the council will vote again," she said. "I think the result may surprise you, Captain Porter." She was right. When the voting began the next day, Queen cast her vote for human membership. Others followed. By a narrow margin, humans were granted full council membership. As Jake stood in the chamber hearing the news, he saw the Queen looking at him from across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but her colors had shifted to a warm golden tone. In that moment, Jake knew that his trip to the stars had changed more than just Earth's future. It had changed something in the galaxy itself, but he could not have predicted just how much. Part 2. Forbidden Alliance. 3 weeks had passed since the council vote. Jake found himself spending more time at Meridian Station than most human representatives. There was always some meeting to attend, some negotiation to oversee, or some new alien species to meet. But the real reason he stayed was different. He stayed because Queen had asked him to. It started with simple things. She would invite him to dinner in her private quarters to discuss human culture. She wanted to know about Earth's oceans, mountains, and deserts. She wanted to understand human music and art. Jake brought her recordings of human symphonies. He showed her paintings and sculptures. He tried to explain why humans created beauty even when they did not need to for survival. "Your species wastes resources on things that do not keep you alive," the Queen said one evening. Her colors shifted to a soft blue. "Art cannot protect you from danger. Music cannot feed you, yet you create these things anyway. Why?" Jake sat across from her in her dining chamber. The room was decorated with precious stones and rare metals from across the galaxy. A meal of synthesized proteins was laid out before them. Jake had learned that the Queen did not eat like humans did, but she enjoyed the ritual of sharing meals. "Because we are not just trying to survive," Jake said. "We are trying to live. There is a difference. Survival means staying alive. Living means finding reasons to want to stay alive. Art and music remind us why we want to stay alive." Queen was quiet for a long time. Her colors cycled through different shades. Finally, she said, "No one has ever explained it like that before. My people do not understand this. We believe in efficiency, logic, and power. Emotion is considered a weakness. But when I listen to your music, I feel something I cannot explain. It is like my thoughts become confused." "That is not confusion," Jake said. "That is feeling. That is what makes humans human." As the weeks passed, the Queen and Jake spent more and more time together. They talked about everything. She told him about the history of her empire, which stretched back over 10,000 years. She told him about her struggles as a ruler, about the council members who challenged her authority, about the loneliness of her position. For the first time in her long life, she was speaking honestly to someone about her real thoughts and fears. Dr. Lisa Grant noticed the change. She called Jake to the human quarters one evening. "You are becoming too close to the Queen," Lisa said, her voice serious. "People are talking. Alien ambassadors are asking questions. This could damage Earth's position on the Council." Jake knew Lisa was right, but he found that he no longer cared about Earth's political position. He cared about the intelligent, powerful woman beneath the alien appearance. He cared about her isolation and her struggle to be heard in a council that had not listened to any voice but the most aggressive ones. "I know," Jake said, "but I cannot just stop seeing her. It is too late for that." Captain Henry, Jake's second-in-command, had other concerns. "This is dangerous," he told Jake privately. "We do not know what her people are capable of. We do not know if she is using you to gain advantage over Earth." Jake did not believe that. He had learned to read the Queen's colors. When she was being truthful, they shifted in a certain pattern. When she was sad, they became dull. When she was happy, they gleamed like gold. He had come to trust these signals, even though he knew he had only known her for a few weeks. One night, everything changed. Queen invited Jake to her private chambers for what she called a final meeting. She said there were things happening in the council that meant they could not see each other anymore. Other powerful aliens were becoming suspicious. King, who ruled the empire, had been making pointed comments about the Queen's relationship with a human. He had suggested it was a sign of weakness. When Jake arrived at her chamber, he found the Queen standing at her window, her colors flickering with agitation. "I have made a decision that will anger many," she said without turning to look at him. "I do not care. I am tired of pretending to be what others expect me to be. I have ruled for over 8,000 years, and I have never felt as alive as I do when I talk to you." Jake walked to her and stood beside her. Together they looked out at the stars. "I know this is difficult," he said. "I know there are risks." "The risks are not the problem," the Queen said, finally turning to face him. Her colors had shifted to a burning gold and deep purple. "The problem is that I want this more than I want anything I have ever wanted in my entire existence. I want you. I want to know what it means to be human. I want to feel what you make me feel." They came together in that moment. What happened between them was something that should not have been possible. The biologists would later say that hybrid pregnancies between species were impossible. The geneticists would declare it to be a miracle. But in that moment, neither of them thought about the impossible. They only thought about each other. Over the following days and weeks, they met in secret. Queen's guards were loyal and kept their silence. Jake and the Queen found small spaces in the vast Meridian station where they could be together. She taught him about her people's history and culture. He taught her about human love and connection. They spoke in quiet voices about what they wanted from their lives. But the other council members were not foolish. They noticed the sudden change in the Queen. They noticed how her guards prevented ambassadors from seeing her at certain hours. They noticed how she had stopped attending some council meetings. Rumors began to spread. King started making jokes during council sessions about the Queen's human admiration. Other conservative members whispered about the degradation of ancient alien bloodlines. The ambassador declared that this was exactly why humans should never have been granted council membership. Despite all of this, Queen refused to end her relationship with Jake. She simply became more secretive. She told Jake that she did not care what the council thought anymore. She told him that she would not hide from anyone. One night, when they were lying together in her chamber, the Queen said something that would change everything. "I believe I am carrying your child," she said quietly. "My body is changing in ways I have never experienced before. The medical readings confirm it. It should be impossible, but it is happening." Jake felt the world shift beneath him. He did not know what to say. The Queen placed her hand on his chest and looked at him with eyes full of fear and hope. "I am going to tell the council," she said. "I am going to tell them everything, and I do not care who likes it or who does not." Jake realized in that moment that he had fallen in love with an alien queen who was brave enough to defy an entire galaxy for something she believed in, and he would stand beside her, no matter what came next. Part 3. The Revelation. The medical scans confirmed what Queen already knew. Dr. Kelly, the chief medical officer from Earth, sat in the private laboratory with Dr. Lisa Grant and reviewed the data twice more to make sure he was reading it correctly. "This is impossible," he said finally, shaking his head. "The genetic structures are completely incompatible. There is no way this pregnancy should be viable." But the scans did not lie. The Queen was indeed carrying a child, a hybrid child, a product of human and HAL genetics combined in a way that modern science said could never happen. Queen stood in the laboratory, watching the doctor's work. Her colors cycled through anxious grays and cautious greens. She had summoned them personally because she needed witnesses. She needed proof that what was happening was real. "When I announce this," she said, her voice steady and clear, "there will be chaos. I need you to be able to confirm the medical facts. Can you do this?" Lisa and exchanged looks. Then Lisa nodded. "Yes," she said, "we can confirm it, but Your Majesty, this will change everything. The political consequences will be severe." "I know," the Queen replied. "That is exactly why I am going to announce it." The next morning, Queen called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. She did not give a reason for the meeting. She did not warn any of the council members about what was coming. She simply stated that she had a matter of extreme importance to discuss. Jake sat in the human section of the council chamber, not knowing what the Queen had planned. He had warned her not to reveal their relationship so publicly. He had told her that it would destroy her position. But the Queen had made it clear that she was done hiding. She was done being what others wanted her to be. The council chamber filled quickly. Ambassadors and rulers arrived, curious about the emergency session. King was there, his features sharp and angular in the light. The ambassadors sat together, whispering to each other. Representatives from dozens of other species took their places at the great table. When all 43 representatives were seated, Queen stood. Her colors blazed bright gold and deep purple. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. "I have gathered you here to make an announcement," she said, her voice projecting throughout the chamber. "An announcement that will challenge everything many of you believe. I am going to speak openly about my personal life, something I have never done before. I am doing this because I refuse to allow shame or fear to silence me anymore." The council chamber fell silent. No one moved. "I have a relationship with Captain Jake Porter of Earth," the Queen continued. "This relationship is personal, it is intimate, and as a result of this relationship, I am pregnant with his child." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Voices exploded across the chamber. Some ambassadors stood up shouting. Others sat in stunned silence. King's face turned a darker shade of red. "This is an outrage," the ambassador shouted. "A queen of ancient bloodline mixing with a primitive human. It is unnatural. It is degradation." "It proves the Queen is weak," King declared. "A ruler who allows emotion to control her judgment cannot lead. The HAL Empire requires new leadership. I demand a vote on the Queen's removal from power." But the Queen did not appear troubled by their words. Instead, she smiled. Her colors shifted to a warm, golden tone that filled the chamber with an almost visible light. "You call it weakness," she said. "I call it strength. For the first time in 8,000 years, I have felt something that all your logic and military power could never give me. I have felt truly alive. I have felt love. I have felt connection to another being that transcends species, biology, and ancient custom." Jake stood up. All eyes turned to him. He walked forward slowly and stood beside the queen. His human form looked small next to her powerful frame, but his eyes were steady and his voice was strong. "Queen is telling you the truth," he said. "I love her, and I will stand beside her and our child, whatever comes. If you want to remove her from power because of your fear and narrow thinking, then you are exactly the kind of leaders who need to be removed from power." The chamber erupted again, but something had shifted. Some of the younger council members were nodding. A few of the more progressive species representatives looked interested rather than outraged. Dr. Lisa Grant stood up next. "I am a scientist," she said loudly. "I have confirmed the pregnancy. It exists. The biological data shows that this hybrid child is real and viable. It should not be possible according to our current understanding, but that means our understanding is incomplete. This child represents a breakthrough. This is not degradation. This is evolution." King stood up. "This is absurd," he declared. "I call for a formal vote. Either the queen submits to exile for her betrayal of her bloodline, or we go to war over this matter." The oldest council member, a being called Architect who had lived for over 15,000 years, stood slowly. When Architect stood, others took notice. The being had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. "I find this matter fascinating, not disgusting," Architect said in a voice like grinding stone. "I have waited for millions of years to see something truly new occur in this galaxy. Most events are merely repetitions of patterns I have already witnessed. But this is new. I vote for the Queen to remain in power, and I support her right to carry this child." Other voices joined in. A vote was called. The results surprised many in the chamber. The Queen remained in power with a narrow but solid majority. The child would be allowed to be born. Human and alien could legally bond without consequence. But King was not done. As the council was dismissing, he approached the Queen privately. "You have made a powerful enemy today," he said quietly so only she could hear. "I will work to undermine you. I will turn allies against you. This human child will bring nothing but suffering to your empire." The Queen looked at him without fear. "Perhaps," she said, "but he will bring something more important. He will bring change. And deep down, King, you know that change is coming whether you accept it or not." That evening, the news spread throughout the galaxy. The headlines appeared on every news network. "Alien Queen declares she is pregnant with human child. Impossible hybrid could change galactic future. Ancient species breaks tradition for love." On Earth, the announcement created a sensation. Jake Porter was suddenly the most famous human alive. Some people celebrated. Some questioned whether their representative had betrayed humanity by crossing lines with an alien. But most people understood what had truly happened. One human had shown the galaxy that humans were worth taking seriously. And in doing so, he had changed the course of history. That night, as Queen rested in her chamber with Jake beside her, she placed his hand on her belly where their child was growing. Her colors shifted to a warm, peaceful gold. "We did it," she whispered. "We told the truth. Now we must be brave enough to face what comes next." Jake smiled. He had come to the stars to represent his species, but he had found something much more important. He had found a way to prove that connection transcended everything else. And that connection was growing inside the woman he loved. Part 4. Storms of Opposition. The weeks following the public announcement were chaos. Queen's advisors warned her daily about security threats. There were assassination attempts. 3 were prevented. One bomb was found in the ventilation system near her private chambers. Another exploded in a corridor, killing 2 of her guards. King had organized the opposition with frightening efficiency. He brought together all the conservative council members and the ancient species that feared change. They called themselves the Coalition for Pure Bloodlines. They demanded that the council force the queen to terminate her pregnancy. They demanded that humans be expelled from council membership. They demanded that any alliance between humans and the HAL Empire be broken immediately. Jake moved into the Queen's private quarters for her protection. Captain Henry brought security teams from Earth's Defense Force. They set up monitoring systems and trained personnel to watch for threats. What was meant to be a time of joy and preparation for their child had become a time of constant danger. One night, while the Queen slept, Jake stood in her private chamber and watched her. Her colors were dim as she rested. She had lost weight over the past few weeks. The stress of carrying a hybrid child while fighting off political enemies was wearing on her, but her determination had not wavered. Dr. Lisa Grant brought Jake troubling news one morning. She found him on the observation deck staring out at the stars. "The Coalition is planning something major," Lisa said quietly. "We have intercepted communications between King and several other council members. They are planning a coup attempt. They want to remove the Queen from power by force." Jake felt cold anger move through him. "When?" he asked. "In approximately 2 weeks," Lisa replied. "That is when the Queen is supposed to have her medical evaluation. They plan to take her into custody during that evaluation and declare her unfit to rule. They will claim her pregnancy has made her mentally unstable." Jake immediately went to the Queen. He told her everything Lisa had discovered. Queen did not seem surprised. She stood at her window, looking out at the vast structure of Meridian Station. Her colors flickered with determination mixed with sadness. "They have already tried to remove me 3 times in my 8,000-year reign," she said. "But never because of something like this. Never because they believed I had betrayed my bloodline. That fear is much more powerful than simple political disagreement." "We need to leave," Jake said. "We can go to Earth. Earth will protect you." The Queen turned to him. "No," she said firmly. "If I run, then they have won. They will say that I was weak. They will say that I was ashamed of our child. They will use that shame to control other young leaders who might think about breaking tradition." "So what do we do?" Jake asked. "We fight," the Queen said. "But we do not fight with weapons. We fight with the truth. We fight with unity." Over the next few days, Jake worked with the Queen to prepare. They sent out messages to every council member who had not yet declared for the Coalition. They explained the coup plot. They explained that King was using fear of change to consolidate power. They explained that the Queen's child was a symbol of a new era of galactic cooperation, not degradation. The response was better than Jake expected. 17 council members publicly declared their support for the Queen. The younger species that had been oppressed by the older powers for centuries saw in the Queen's rebellion a chance to challenge the old order. Progressive voices grew louder. Then came the day of the coup attempt. Queen arrived at the medical evaluation chamber with Jake and several guards. King and 5 other powerful council members were waiting. They had armed soldiers stationed outside the chamber. "Your Majesty," King said with mock respect, "you must submit to a psychological evaluation. The Coalition has concerns about your mental fitness to rule." The Queen did not argue. She walked into the evaluation chamber. But before the door closed, she placed her hand on Jake's shoulder. "Stay strong," she said. "What happens next will determine the future of the galaxy." Jake and the guards stood in the corridor. Tension was thick in the air. Then, slowly, other council members began to arrive. The progressive ones, the younger species, the ones who had decided to take a stand. Architect appeared. The ancient being looked at King with something like disappointment. "I expected better of you," Architect said. "I expected you to accept change with at least some dignity. but instead you choose violence and coercion. That is the difference between true power and desperate grasping for control. King's face turned dark red. "This does not concern you, Ancient One," he said. "Stay out of HAL business." "It concerns all of us," replied one of the younger council members, an ambassador from a small species that had never had a voice before. "Because if we allow this coup to succeed, then we all lose our freedom. Then the oldest and most powerful will simply take whatever they want." What happened next was almost like a military standoff. King's soldiers stood ready, but they were outnumbered now by allied forces from 7 different council member species. For a moment, violence seemed certain. Then Queen emerged from the evaluation chamber. She was calm. Her colors blazed bright gold. "The evaluation is complete," she announced. "I am mentally fit to rule. I am emotionally capable of leading my people. And most importantly, I am willing to change this galaxy whether the old powers like it or not." King stepped forward, but before he could speak, Architect raised one massive hand. "The vote is called," Architect declared. "All in favor of recognizing Queen as the legitimate ruler of the HAL Empire and allowing her to carry her hybrid child, signify by standing." The coalition that supported the Queen stood. It was not unanimous, but it was strong. Strong enough to make King understand that his coup had failed before it truly began. King left the chamber without another word. His face promised future conflict, but for now the Queen had won. Over the following days, most of the assassination threats stopped. Not all, but enough that Queen could breathe easier. She continued with her pregnancy. She continued to rule, and she continued to grow closer to Jake Porter. Dr. Kelly examined the Queen regularly. The child was healthy. It displayed characteristics of both species. It had the genetic flexibility of humans combined with the strength genes of the HAL. The doctors predicted that the child would be remarkable. One evening, as Jake and the Queen sat together watching the stars, she took his hand and placed it on her belly. The child moved. Jake felt it clearly. "Our son," the Queen said. "He is strong. He is going to change everything." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "He already has," he said. "He has changed us, and nothing will ever be the same because of that." The Queen looked at him with eyes full of love. Her colors blazed in patterns of gold and warm purple. "Then let the galaxy prepare itself," she said, "because we are about to show them what the future looks like." Part 5. A New Dawn. The birth of the hybrid child sent shockwaves through the galaxy. In the medical facility of Meridian Station, Dr. Kelly and a team of the finest physicians from multiple species worked carefully to ensure both mother and child survived the birth. Queen's biology was unlike anything they had studied. The child's genetic makeup represented a completely new form of life. Jake sat in the waiting chamber outside the medical facility. Captain Henry sat beside him. They had not spoken for hours. There was nothing to say. They could only wait. Then the doors opened. Dr. Kelly stepped out, his face showing exhaustion but also joy. "You have a son," he said. "A healthy son. Both mother and child are well." Jake felt relief flood through his entire body. He stood up immediately and followed Dr. Kelly into the birth chamber. Queen lay resting on a medical bed. She looked tired, but her colors blazed with contentment. In her arms lay an infant that was unlike any being Jake had ever seen. The child had the general shape of a human but with subtle differences. His skin shimmered slightly, showing hints of his mother's color-shifting ability. His eyes were darker than human eyes but not as completely black as pure HAL eyes. He was beautiful. "His name is," the Queen said softly, "Porter of Earth and HAL. He belongs to both worlds." Jake approached carefully and looked at his son. The child opened his eyes and looked directly at his father. In that moment, Jake understood something fundamental. This child was not just a symbol. He was real. He was alive. He was the future of not one world but two. He reached out and gently touched his son's hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his father's finger with surprising strength. News of the birth spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Reactions were mixed. Some celebrated it as a triumph of love and unity. Others saw it as an abomination. But most people were simply curious. They wanted to see this impossible child. 1 week later, the Galactic Council met for a formal vote on several historic matters. The first was a vote to officially recognize the legitimacy of Queen and Jake Porter's union. The second was a vote on expanding human rights and establishing permanent cultural exchange programs with Earth. The third was a vote on creating the Institute for Cross-Species Understanding, led jointly by humans and the HAL Empire. When the voting began, something remarkable happened. Even council members who had supported King's coalition voted for the new measures. When asked later why they had changed their positions, many said the same thing. They had seen the child. They had seen, and they understood that the future was no longer in the hands of the past. The votes passed with strong majorities. Queen and Jake Porter became official partners. Earth was granted full diplomatic and trade status with the Galactic Council. The Institute for Cross-Species Understanding was established, with Dr. Lisa Grant as one of the founding directors. King and his faction did not fade away. They remained as the opposition, a reminder that change was always contested, but they had lost their power to stop progress. They had become the voice of yesterday, not tomorrow. Months passed, grew rapidly. His development was faster than human children but slower than pure HAL children. He displayed remarkable abilities. He could understand multiple languages within weeks. He showed emotional intelligence that was unusual for an infant. He appeared to have inherited his father's curiosity and his mother's natural leadership. Dr. Kelly studied the child constantly. He produced paper after paper describing his unique biology. His research suggested that hybrid children between humans and HALs could be incredibly adaptable. They could potentially survive in environments where either pure species would struggle. They represented a new evolutionary path, not a degradation of existing bloodlines. Jake and the Queen settled into a life that combined duty with love. The Queen continued to rule her empire with even greater wisdom than before. She had learned from her relationship with Jake that tradition was not sacred. It was simply the choices of the past, and each generation had the right to make its own choices. Jake became the formal ambassador of Earth to the HAL Empire. He worked with Wei and other diplomatic officials to build genuine cooperation between worlds. Trade increased. Scientific collaboration flourished. Young humans and young aliens began to study together at newly established exchange academies. 1 year after his birth, Queen and Jake stood together on the observation deck of a new research station. Below them, a team of human engineers and HAL engineers worked together to build new technology. Neither species could have built it alone. Together, they created things neither had ever imagined. "I want to tell you something," the Queen said, her hand resting on her belly. Her colors shimmered with the soft pink and gold of joy and anticipation. Jake looked at her and smiled. He understood immediately. "Another child," he said. "You are pregnant again." "Yes," the Queen confirmed. "Our daughter. She will be even stronger than her brother. She will know a galaxy where humans and aliens work together instead of fighting for dominance. She will not have to be brave the way had to be brave. She will simply be born into a world that has already changed." Jake pulled his partner close. Together they looked out at the stars. Below them, on different planets across the galaxy, similar scenes were happening. Young scientists from multiple species worked together in laboratories. Young soldiers from different worlds trained side by side. Young artists created music and art that blended human and alien styles. The future was being built one collaboration at a time. And in the council chamber of Meridian Station, a young porter was being brought to observe his mother's official proceedings. He would grow up knowing both worlds. He would grow up understanding that love transcended biology. He would grow up as proof that the impossible could become real through courage and commitment. Architect, the ancient being who had lived for over 15,000 years, watched the child enter the chamber. When looked at the old council member, he smiled. A genuine smile, a child's smile, the smile of the future. Architect's ancient features shifted into what was approximately a smile. In 15,000 years of life, the being had witnessed countless changes to the galaxy. But this was different. This was not just change. This was evolution. This was the moment when the galaxy began to understand that diversity was strength, not weakness. As the council session began, Queen stood at the head of the table, cradling her young son. Her colors blazed bright and clear and hopeful. "I have called this council to order," she announced, "to present a new proposal for galactic cooperation. But first, I want to remind all of you of something you may have forgotten. We are not enemies. We are neighbors on this vast space that holds us all. My son is the living proof that enemies can become family. The question now is not whether we can work together. The question is whether we have the courage to continue doing so." The council chamber was silent. Then, slowly, council members stood up. All of them. Even King's supporters stood. Not because they had changed their beliefs, but because they had learned that change was already happening. And the wise choice was to adapt to the new reality rather than fight against it. Jake watched from the human section of the chamber. He thought about his sister back on Earth, who was a teacher. He thought about his father, who was a fisherman. He thought about all the ordinary people on all the ordinary worlds who would never know his name. But they would live in the world he had helped to create. A world where the future was not predetermined by ancient custom or species boundaries. A world where love could change the galaxy. Queen caught his eye across the chamber. Her colors blazed in the specific pattern that meant only one thing. The pattern that meant love. The pattern that meant home. Jake nodded to her. In that moment, with his son held safely in his partner's arms, with the entire Galactic Council standing to acknowledge a new era, Jake Porter understood the truth that would be remembered for 10,000 years. Humans had come to the stars as representatives of a young and hungry species, but they had not conquered through weapons or force. They had conquered through something far more powerful. They had conquered through the simple, radical act of being willing to see the other as worth loving. The age of the HAL Empire and the age of human expansion had ended. The age of unity, the age of shared futures, the age of families that crossed the boundaries of worlds and species, had begun. And it had all started with one captain brave enough to stand firm, one queen brave enough to break tradition, and one child brave enough to be born between two worlds and make them one. In the years to come, historians would call this the transformation, the moment when the galaxy stopped looking backward at tradition and started looking forward to possibility. They would call it the age when love became the most powerful force in the universe. They would tell stories about Queen and Captain Jake Porter and their impossible son. But the greatest story was not about them. It was about what came after. It was about the millions of young beings from hundreds of different species who grew up in a galaxy where cooperation was natural and love transcended biology. It was about the future that was born the moment a queen decided to follow her heart instead of her tradition. The queen looked down at Little in her arms. The child was sleeping now, his small fingers curled into fists. One day he would stand before the council himself. One day he would lead. But for now he slept peacefully in the arms of his mother, in a galaxy that had learned, finally, to embrace the future instead of fear it. And in that moment, with the future secure and the past finally released, everything was exactly as it should be.